Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And I won't say my usual line, which is I'm so excited about this week's guest because you're so sick of me saying it, but I think you are really going to enjoy this week's conversation. I know I am. For those of you who've seen my stand-up comedy, you know that I talk about my gang pap and being felt up by med students. So you are going to really enjoy, I think, this week's conversation because I'm going to be talking with, this is like rare, other than the SPs that I work with, to meet someone who is someone I don't know from a different state who does what I do, who does standardized patient work. So before I introduce her, in case any of you listening don't know me or don't know me that well and didn't know that, what is that? So basically, if you've ever seen the Seinfeld episode where Kramer is theatrically portraying gonorrhea at a med school, that is kind of course, I don't know about my guest, but we haven't done anything that dramatic here in Scranton. But basically, we are portraying ailments. We are going in being patients, but we're being paid to basically act out. So we're not real patients. We're what they call standardized patients. But this is how med students learn. And they get practice with a person as opposed to just reading a book or, doing a simulation on a robot. So they get to work with real people. So that is who I'm going to be talking with this week is Katie Culligan. And not only does she do standardized patient work, she has a podcast about standardized patient work, which I think is the coolest thing. And I neglected the one thing I say every week. How do I know my guests? Well, this one's going to be a case of not networking or someone I knew, but social media. I believe it was on Instagram that I came across Katie's podcast. And I'm like, oh my gosh, someone else who does standardized patient work. I was super excited. So without further ado, welcome Katie Culligan.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you all about this.
I can't wait to dive into this. It's like, and as I said to you before I hit the record button, whenever I tell people about this, inevitably they want to know more. And I've referred so many people, and it's I joke, I'm like, I'm gonna get myself out of work because people are like, how do you become that? I want to do that.
And it's funny, we actually have an episode that's literally about that. Like, how do you become a standardized patient? And we
Yeah.
interviewed somebody who told people how to do it and does workshops. So yeah, it really is a thing that people are fascinated by. And even people that aren't in the industry or don't know about it, they can easily potentially become standardized patients depending on what their goals are.
Yeah, yeah. So before we get into that, because I cannot wait. Like I'm super excited to talk about that. But I don't know you. I didn't really know you until I saw, like I said, I saw your podcast, a promotion for it, I should say, on Instagram. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I was thinking, I've never done an episode about this, even though everyone I talk to is so interested. And I thought, well, who better to talk to than someone who does it and has a podcast about it? But I don't really, we've never met before, and we're just meeting tonight virtually. Tell me and my listeners a little bit about yourself. We did talk before I hit the record button. You've been to Scranton, so that's a plus. You were here for a wedding, so I'm excited to hear that. But tell me just whatever it is you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about your background and then what led you to SP work.
Yeah, yeah. So I am based out of the DC area. I live right outside of DC in McLean, Virginia. And I was a theater major in college, James Madison University, musical theater concentration. So I come from a theater background. And when I graduated college, I was very fortunate to do a show with a woman who said, "Hey, I'm never going to have a normal day job again as an actor." I said, "Tell me more." So she gave me all of this advice and contact about all of the schools in the DC metro area to become a standardized patient, which I didn't know existed at that point. But apparently it was a very popular thing. And this was the end of 2007. So she kind of got me in the door with a lot of places, and I started working little by little at different universities, different med schools, sim centers. And over time, I started working at more and more. The more you say yes, hopefully, if they like you, they ask you to do more and more. And I just found it was such a great, flexible day job, truly, for an actor because I was doing, until the pandemic, I was doing tons of stage work in the DC area. So my nights weren't always available. My weekends weren't always available, but daytime weekdays often were. And so that just became a great gig. And it actually got me, it really was a bit of an acting training as well for like on camera screen work stuff due to the subtlety and nuance. And I've learned so much medically too, honestly. I'm also a personal trainer and group exercise instructor and health coach.
Oh, wow.
I have a certificate in health coaching from Georgetown. So a lot of it all kind of comes together in this world, which is really cool. However, I am not a doctor. Like I will never be a doctor, and that's okay. But I would be happy to say I would play one on TV at some point. But yeah, so that's kind of how I came about the business, and since then I've been doing it a lot. I've done other role playing as well, and virtual during the pandemic. And the other thing is I actually have taught med students. This is crazy, I'm sure, but I've taught med students as a standardized patient medical maneuvers. So we have a couple episodes about that, which is called like standardized patient instructor work or physical exam teaching associate work, where we actually get trained to then teach first and second year med students, which does make us feel like a doctor, even though we're still not one. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself in the, kind of a nutshell.
Let me ask you. So, and I know you mentioned that you have a daughter. Is it a daughter or you have a
A
son? You have
son,
a son. You
actually.
have
Yeah.
a small child. I knew you have a little one.
Yes.
So you're obviously very busy, and you mentioned a health coach, a personal trainer. You've got a lot going on, and I love that they're all related to wellness in some degree. Is this your main form of like work, that standardized patient work? Is this still a major part of your life of what you do on a regular basis?
A very good question. It has taken, oddly, around the time that we launched our podcast, it started to take a back seat due to me having a baby. So I found that I am still doing some of it, but I was making the majority of my money from it, either that or personal training, group exercise, and standardized patient work was a lot of my income, because a lot of stage work just does. I'm non-union currently, and it just doesn't pay the bills in the way I would love it to. So I just found that was very dominant in my life, and now I do it on occasion, and I do plan and hope to get back to it more. But I just feel like, at least in the meantime, while I'm kind of staying home with the baby and caretaking, because he's 20 months right now, um, that I can at least work with the podcast and like promoting the world of standardized patients. And so that's been kind of my, I don't want to say consolation prize, but like it just kind of feels like I'm still part of that world, because I'm still connecting with people even deeper. Honestly, these are people that I know, some that I don't. And it's been really, really cool. And to connect with people through Instagram as well, TikTok, and other sources, like from all over the world, even like not even just the USA, but it's been a really cool thing. So yeah, but I do plan to get back to it at some point.
That's awesome. So let me ask you, you said around the world. So are there, I mean, it's probably a stupid question. I would imagine other countries do this as well. Why wouldn't they? But I haven't read it myself or seen it, but obviously you have, right?
Yes. So one of our guests from season 2 is from Canada. So she wrote a book about it, and I was also asked to write an article for a magazine called Simzine that is in multiple different languages, but I don't know if it's an Italian person or Spanish. And then I also, through social media, there's a lot of Spanish speaking countries that have a lot of sim work that I've connected with. So, and there might be a couple others, but I have to go back into my emails. But yeah, it's just cool. It's like it's everywhere.
Yeah, that's really neat. And it's funny, I should have remembered, or I should say realized, when I'm thinking other countries, I forget Canada's another country. But I did have on a guest a couple months ago. Her name was Melissa. She was actually working in the Sim Center, not as
Oh,
a standardized patient, but she was like the scheduler for a couple of years. She married someone who was living in Canada, so now she lives in Canada and she's doing standardized patient work there in
oh,
Canada as well, which is pretty neat.
that's awesome. So maybe she knows our guest from the, you never know.
Yeah,
It's
I'll have
small
to
world.
ask her to listen to your episode there to connect.
Yeah.
That is really cool. And I think, to let my listeners know, in case you are curious, so for me, my story, when I left my quote unquote day job in 2010 to promote my business, I do laughter yoga. I needed something else, right? So I needed to pay the bills, and someone had mentioned the here in Scranton, Pennsylvania, our medical college had just opened up around 2010. So I submitted an application and I started working doing it. And I love the fact that it was per diem. And I'm guessing, and you could tell me if your story is different as far as the way that it's done here. It's per diem. So you're sent information. It's like, these are the dates. Are you available? And if you can't do it, you say no. If you can, great. And then you'll hear about, there's nothing guaranteed. At least that's how ours works. It's not a part-time job. We are per diem, and they'll reach out to us, and that's how it's been working for me for the past gosh, almost 13 years. Is that how your experience has been, Katie?
Yes, I would say all of my jobs as standardized patients, simulated patients, are independent contractor, except for one university that hires us as staff. However, it's still not like, there are some months where we're there a lot and some months where we're not there at all or barely. So it pretty much is per diem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it, honestly, that's what makes it. And I love what you said. You have an acting background. For people who do things at night and want something in the day, but they want something flexible. Or, someone I know, for us, for here in Scranton, we have a lot of retired people, people
Hmm.
who are like late 50s, 60s, who, some it's a little form of income, but others it's a pastime, something to do. And we have some actors as well. For myself, like I said, I was filling in income, and now, to be honest, I mean, I'm in a good place because I'm doing my business still, but I'm kind of getting back to my roots of marketing. So I'm an independent contractor working with a couple different nonprofits, helping with their marketing. That's paying my bills, but this I still do, even if I only do a couple days a month, because I do enjoy it. I will tell you, and again, I'm sure this has been similar for you. I think just because of the nature of the work and where it's located, everyone's been wonderful. The
Mm.
staff is great where I am. The doctors, the students, everyone's been great, and they're so appreciative and eager to learn. And as you, I think, made reference a few minutes ago, I've learned a lot about my body. I couldn't have told you before where my liver was. Now I know how many centimeters it is.
And so when a student gets it wrong, you're like, I know
Mm.
exactly how many centimeters this is. Okay.
Isn't it funny though when you're like, I love like when we're testing, and sometimes I'm sure programs are run differently, but depending on the faculty person, they might say, okay, now Janine, do you have any tips or anything you'd like to add to tell the students so that they could benefit from? And I tell them all the time about the testing that we do know where things are. So even if you don't get a pulse, even if you're not getting the right blood pressure, you can pretend, but you can't pretend it's in the wrong place. Like, if you're feeling for my femoral pulse at my feet, you're wrong. Like, obviously
Right.
we know where things are located. So don't go, oh, I'm going to feel for your femoral pulse. No, you're not. Not by my heel, you're not.
Right, exactly. Exactly. It's so true. Yeah, it's nice that we know these things about ourselves too, right? That we could potentially, it could come in handy someday, you never know, or maybe it already has.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Again, as far as the organs, I didn't know. Honestly, I didn't know which side of my body my pancreas was or my liver, and now I do. And even the pulses, I didn't know. And I mean, I'm not. I mean, obviously, if I read a book, I suppose, but I never got into anatomy or biology too deeply. I didn't know how many pulses we had in our body, and I just find this stuff honestly fascinating. I mean, my day job was working for Blue Cross of Northeastern Pennsylvania, which later
Ah.
became Highmark Blue Shield. So I wrote materials related to health and wellness, and worked with the provider relations area and the quality assurance. So I find this stuff very interesting. So I love hearing their conversations when they're talking to the students about what they're learning that week. I love absorbing all of that. I think it's so interesting.
Oh, it totally is. And I totally agree. That's really interesting that you were doing more insurance, but of the health work. Yeah. I think we have Blue Cross Blue Shield. But it's funny that when I started training, and this was in 2017, to become a standardized patient instructor, to start teaching the students about, not about the why, but the how. That's what our whole job is. Like, the doctors will say like why we're doing this, and or for the most part, like getting really nitty gritty in that. But we're like, how do we do the maneuver? And so I started all of a sudden like taking my husband's pulse, you know, on it, like his radial pulse, and he'd be like, "Are you feeling for my pulse again?" Like we'd just be holding hands, or like I'd just be I still do it to this day because I'm just like I want to see if my skills are still there to like get the pulse and find it. It's really fun for me. So.
Well, you mentioned earlier about not being a doctor. I should probably watch that because I find myself when people are like about stomach pain, I'll be like, was it in your right side or your left side? Was it in the upper quadrant or the lower quadrant? Was it
Yeah,
sharp? Is
right.
it steady? I'm asking all these questions. I'm like, Janine, you're not a doctor, but I'd like to like at least maybe help them know whether it is their appendix or not, something
Of
along those lines.
course. Yeah, because you do have some information now, depending on what cases you've done, of like what are signs of appendicitis. Oh my gosh, I've done so many appendicitis cases over the years, and being like a woman, um, especially like I started when I was probably in my early 20s, so like a woman of childbearing age, everything happens in that lower right quadrant, like for these cases, because they're like, it could be an ectopic pregnancy, it could be appendicitis, it could be something with your liver, it could be just a stomach ache. Like there's so many things that I just feel like I know that lower right quadrant so well.
I know. I was stumped when my cousin, I think she had pain on her left side. And I'm like, I'm
Mm.
stumped. Sorry, I can't help you there. I could tell you a lot about what's going on the right side.
Could be spleen, perhaps. That
Ah,
would be
yeah.
my first guess, but meh, I don't
But you
know.
never know. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the ectopic pregnancy. I've played that one years ago. Thank God they put her away. Her name was, I love some of the names, Helen Hightower.
Oh,
Oh,
love
we
that.
used
Wow.
to laugh about this case because we often joke that they're like frustrated soap opera writers, some of these doctors who write the cases, because she literally smoked, I think, Pall Mall cigarettes, and she loved to read romance and go to the opera. And we laughed. We're like, well, we don't
Wow.
really have the opera in Scranton, but we do have occasional musicals and things of that nature.
So maybe to her that was the opera. Like she has a whole affect even.
She saw it in an elevated manner there.
That is
So
funny that they would write that in, but yeah,
some of
to
the
their
stuff
own.
is just you have to scratch your head. I don't know. What are some of your, I don't want to say favorite, but I will say favorite. So, what are some of your favorite cases that you've played? Because they can be interesting. I mean, not just
Oh yeah.
learning, but like for us, we're kind of laughing sometimes at the details, the hobbies they give the person, or things like that.
Yes. Okay, so I have to say all my favorite cases that I've played, just coming from an acting background, tend to be all history, and we call them uh professional development ones. So oftentimes we'll do these with a big group of people, and then one student gets up and like does it in front of everybody. And those are so fun because I get to play kind of a difficult patient. So one of my favorite ones, because they don't even get angry, is I am somebody who just likes to talk. And I talk and talk and talk and talk and don't let them get a word in edgewise at all. Another character is one who is pushing the boundaries um, for the student doctor in front of everyone, saying like, well, I smoke pot sometimes, like, do you? Yeah, and like, how do they deal with that as the medical professional? And that one is super fun because I get really buddy buddy with that person. And but also I've done angry cases. Those are really fun. You get to I like all the ones that I get to pull out my acting but don't have to cry, because I've done a ton of ones where I have to get really upset, and those are great, but I don't love doing them because it's so like it takes so much out of you. And then on the other hand, I will say there's a one I did many years ago that literally was no acting whatsoever. It was There was a fake arm in the room, and the student, I think they were fourth year maybe, had to come in, and the patient was crashing, and we just had to say, "I'm crashing." Oh, and then we would do a checklist to see how they could drill the IV into a bone, and it was a bunch of different steps, and it was only interesting to me because like I've never seen anything like that. So for me to learn how one might do it, I couldn't tell you now, but that one was fun in a different way. But all the ones where they're just palpating my stomach, like I've just done so many of them. I'm kind of like, I want the acting. I want to act. How about you? What's some of your favorite ones?
Well, and I should say again, for people listening, in case you're curious, you don't have to be an actor. I know, at least for us, it's not required, but it is something that I'd say actors are drawn to. In fact, when I did hear about it, it was from someone I had done improv with, and he was like, oh, they're looking for. But so I'm not an actor per se. I do comedy and I've done plays through the years, but you don't have to be. In fact, at our school, they don't want us to do too big emotions because, well, they're like, you don't want to scare the students. So it's funny you mentioned about the crying. Like, I joke with the manager that runs the simulation center. There was one case I played many years ago where it was potentially breast cancer. And so all the other SPs who played this came out and they're like, oh, they were offering me a tissue and all that. And I'm like, and hugs. And I'm like, I didn't get any of that. And it was like, apparently I wasn't giving off the right vibes, but I don't do the crying well. And thankfully, they don't ask us to do that. They ask us to like be sad, but not really go there. We do have many people who are actors, and some of them really do go there. But I'm
Sure.
not
Yeah.
one who's really capable of the crying, but I would love to play an angry case. Oh my gosh. I keep saying that. I'm like, can you give us an angry case? Because I would love that.
Those are the best. They're so, so fun. I will say I've done one case, I'm reminded now, where I have to like get actually like aggressive, like not hitting anybody, but and that was a little out of my comfort zone. I will say, like, anger here I can do, but anger of like yell that one, I wish I could have taken more time. Like I don't know, something about it was challenging for me. But I will say that for the crying ones, for what it's worth, and to your credit, they whenever we've been trained on these really intense crying, potential crying ones, they've always said, be present in the moment, whether you cry, whether you get angry, whether you're silent. Like, so much of how you, it is your own subjective uh perspective. Like, it's what you're taking in at that moment, and it's not only how you're feeling that day, it's how the student delivers the news too. Because if they deliver it poorly, then you're going to react a totally different way than if they deliver it so empathetically and so well. That's when I find myself getting like teary, is when someone's really good at it. But if they are super detached and cold and by the book, then it's really easy to just shut down and like, phew, nothing, silence.
That's a great point. You're absolutely right. And yeah, no, that is true. I played a case not too long ago where I so this is kind of funny. We're kind of in a shortage. I'm sure this is probably not the case where you are, but we don't have enough young people like in their 20s, because they'll come in and then they're students, and then but they don't live here, and then they're gone. So I will be 52 in a couple weeks, and I've recently played like a 28-year-old, and I'm like, wow, what a stretch. I better buy some better anti-wrinkle cream. But I mean, because there's a shortage of young people, and I had to play a case where it's, I think it's just a UTI, but her husband's away from the military and she slept with someone else recently. And it is so interesting the way the students respond, because you'll have some, and saying something that's an empathetic statement but not being empathetic, is that happens where it's like,
Oh
oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry to hear that, or they don't
Right.
say it at all. But the ones who are like, oh, that must be really difficult for you that he's gone. I'm so sorry. Like, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not an actress or an actor, but like those you get so like, wow, like I did feel something really emotional because they were so kind and genuine. It was just like, thank you. No, thank you for saying that. It has been difficult. I do miss him. And you get
Yeah.
more natural, I think, or in the moment, depending on how they're responding to you.
Yeah, totally. And like, that's also kind of the cream rises there of like what students are really good at that. And some take time, like you said, some will say an empathetic statement but not say it empathetically. And we've all, like, I know exactly what you're talking about, and like, they're on the right track, at least they know to say it. But they still have got to get there, rather than the people that don't even think to say it. So it's definitely a learning curve, and some people just have it, they just know. And so that type of stuff comes so well to them and so easily that they can fit it in, like, oh, of course that makes sense. But others, it's, sometimes sometimes our joke as SPs are sometimes like, yeah, I think maybe they should go into research. That's
Yes. We say that too.
that's
We're like, let's hope he's behind the scenes or she's behind the scenes.
yeah, yeah. Like, go into medicine, please. But maybe you don't want to be with. Maybe you want to be a surgeon, even. I don't know. Like, there's
Yeah.
not to say that there aren't great empathetic surgeons as well, but I don't work with surgeons really when I think about
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
But yeah.
we don't either. But do you think, and this is just your I'm just asking your opinion. You're right that for some people it does come naturally, and you can tell that instantly. The ones because they're just talking to you. They're just like, they're stopping their train of the thought and all those questions to say something that is coming naturally to them. But do you think that empathy, because I've had this conversation with people recently, do you think empathy can be, I know that it can be taught as far as when it's appropriate, right? But do you think that it can really be taught in a genuine sense? Like, because sometimes the best maybe they could do is go, yeah, I'm sorry. But I don't know if I mean, unless they're short of taking acting classes, which they may not, do you think that
Yeah.
they can really learn that to express it empathetically?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer. I would assume that perhaps the more they do it, they can learn a little bit because especially when they're out in the real world, I would like to think that they're going to see real people dealing with these like real emotions and real pain. But also, maybe if they've been through some of these things or a family member has, I do know when we've done some of these breaking bad news cases, like where they tell us we have cancer and that type of stuff, there are some students that get very, very upset, even watching, even if they're not the ones doing it. And sometimes if they are, like in the feedback portion, the discussion, if they've had, a history of that or a family member, a friend, of anything like that. So I think those things can certainly help. Like now, so we mentioned my toddler earlier, like I could never put myself in those shoes before as a mother. I just couldn't do it. I was like, I have a cat. He's amazing. I love him, but like it's still not the same. And so now I definitely I was out earlier today. I was in a store and I heard a newborn-ish baby crying, and my heart just was like, ugh. Like in the back maybe 3 years ago, I would have been like, oh my god, how annoying, But now I'm like, oh,
Like
that
I
poor
am all
little
the time.
baby, yeah, like because it's annoying, it is. But now it's just like I'm thinking about like I'm glad that's not my baby that's crying. Like I'm glad that somebody else has to deal with it, but I can put myself in the shoes of like I know what that feels like and to then like all of the emotions that can come with it. So like in a real world perspective, I now will be better at acting certain things as a parent, but also in these environments. However, something that's like I came in because I've been doing needle drugs, like and I have HIV or AIDS, HIV. That is one I did many, many years ago. And I can't put myself in those. Like that's a tough one because I've never, luckily, done that. So it's just all of those things that I think anyone can get better at certain things like empathy, but at the same time, we all have our weaknesses too. I think, in places where we're just going to have to give it our best, and I would
Yeah.
hope that the students do that.
Yeah. And that's very fair what you said. And I think that's probably what they're shooting for at the schools. If they practice enough, it probably will come more like naturally that they would think, oh, I should probably offer some comfort here in some words. And, I do believe that some people who are born with it, no matter, we all have different skills because maybe the person who isn't as good or at sounding empathetic or genuine may have other skills where they're very observant, and they
Yeah.
notice something that another student might. So, and I do think, as you said, they will also maybe grow into it as they experience more throughout their lives as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and that is all we can hope, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I know I've been to doctors, maybe you have too, that are not empathetic, and
Hmm.
because of that, I have left those doctors, and even one of them, I wrote a note, a handwritten note, because I was so frustrated about them, and that is really not in my nature. So, but I was coming from an empowered place of I have control over my health care. I don't need to go to this person who's going to make me cry, or whatever, or like not communicate with me well. I can choose someone else to go to. So yeah, I just think that when we all have those bad healthcare experiences, it just makes us, I don't know about you, but it makes me feel better about being a standardized patient, working with these future doctors. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that is the goal. We're helping, and hopefully it will make a difference so that they will be, better doctors that are coming out and continuing to come out because we need that. And and what they're teaching them, I think is great. It's super important what they're learning.
mhm.
Um, what so I've asked you your favorite case. Uh, what what are some of the things that have happened that were kind of funny or
Ooh.
things that stand out to you? Because I'm sure through the years there have definitely been some funny things.
Oh, yes, so many. So many that I started writing some down. It's like what avenue to take with this, honestly. So one of my favorite, I mean, this is my bad, but it's still one of my favorite stories is it was a very long exam day and I was real tired. I was in my 20s, so I just wasn't taking care of my sleep uh and so during one of the encounters that I was down, not doing it, I took a nap in the hallway because there was no place to take a nap. I just like literally kind of went under a desk in a hallway and I was out of people's way and I set my alarm. It was on my BlackBerry at the time, so you can probably tell what year this is. And I set my alarm, which was set to the entertainer to come off so I could then be ready for my next encounter time. And all of a sudden, I guess things were running early. So I hear students, please log in. Patients, please prepare, which was always for this particular school, what they said when things are about to go down. So I'm like, whew, I wake up, I sprint right into the room, but I didn't have time to turn off my phone or set the alarm to not go off. So outside of the room in the hallway during this person's encounter, the entertainer was playing for a good 5 minutes, like just a and I, oh my God, I just like the student, I'm sure was just like trying to, not worry about it. And I was like, that is me. Oh my God, that's me. And I started laughing, but just giggling like to myself. So that to me was really, really crazy. But here's a really interesting, funny thing is that I used to live in France when I was in middle school. And I went to the American School of Paris. And there's this one day, yeah.
I'm so jealous. I'm
Oh,
so
it was cool.
jealous.
Well, in my sixth grade self didn't think so, but my eighth grade self did think so. So by the time I moved back in ninth grade, I was like, I want to stay there. But so there's a point to this, I promise. So one of my brother's best friends in middle school at the American School of Paris, who I knew quite well, apparently went to med school at this place in DC where I was a SP, and I did not know this. And so one day I am doing one of the hardest encounters, which is for me, which is an unintentional intercourse case. So this girl comes in basically for kind of a rape kit and she's really upset and it's a hard one to do. And it's always on like a Friday morning at 8 a.m. Ugh. So anyway,
Oh.
one morning I'm doing it and the student comes in and it's immediate. I'm like, oh my God, that's Eric. Oh my God. That's like in my head. And I'm just like, does he know that this is me? Oh my God. I don't know. Like, and I'm in this character and I'm doing this case of all things. And at the very end, thank goodness we got to give feedback in person because after we were able to like shut it down, come back in, he's like, Katie? I'm like, Eric? We're just like, how are you? It was bananas. And the whole time I was like, why did it have to be in this case? And I'm just like this, struggling, really struggling. So, but I mean, there's so many things that have happened in encounters. Like it's endless. How about you? What's like one of the funnier things that's happened?
And like you said, there are many. I mean, it's just, and a lot of times they're so nervous. There's just so many things that can happen. Well, recently I actually forgot the character's name, which I'm sure happens a lot, but I literally was totally blanking out. And I looked at the girl and I'm like, uh, I'm sorry. And I took a moment and I think I finally came up with it. And I said, I'm sorry. That's not, I don't like to break character, but I'm like, that's nothing. And I go, it's just a rough morning. And she goes, and she's laughing. She's like, no, that's fine. No worries. And there, like, again, like you, there's so many I probably can't remember, but there was this other third year that cracked me up because he was interviewing. And sometimes I think some students get into this more than others. They know it's simulated. He was acting like he was a detective more than
Oh,
he was a student. And it was I just found it just tickled me. It was so funny because I was giving different things and he's like, and he's like, aha. It was like he had
Oh,
gotten a clue. He's like, aha, I know. And it was just, he was so funny. I wanted to just laugh so
so
hard.
good. Did you get to give him feedback afterwards?
I did. Well, for us, we don't talk to, like, we don't like have an encounter with them after, but we can on the, it was for a test, so we
Oh,
have on the screen, we can put notes in there. And so what they've asked, of course, you have to, I'm sure you've had this or something similar, where it's the whole compliment sandwich kind of thing, where it's like,
yes.
where you, and it's also can't be personal, like if it's changeable behavior, they'll say you can
Yep.
put it in there. But then there's on the bottom question they've been asking us, we can really just be, I don't want to say you don't want to be rude or mean, but you can just be yourself. You're not, you don't have to couch it in any certain way. It's a question of, would you want this person to be your doctor?
Yeah.
Yes or no. And if you say yes, you don't have to put information like why or supporting evidence. I usually do, because if there's something that stands out, I like to say, oh, this person genuinely seemed to care. They leaned in. There was great eye contact, whatever. And if it's a no, they say you must give a reason. And they
Hmm.
say you can be honest, just be yourself. If you got a bad vibe, it's okay. Like, you can say
Hmm.
that. So for
Hmm.
him, I said yes, but I said he did seem like he was playing a game of Clue, you know, with the aha. And that was more like, I'm sure in real life, in quote unquote real life, I'm sure he wouldn't act like that. But he just may want to remember that for tests, that it's just the way he
Yeah.
was acting was like, okay, buddy, you know?
Right. And also, are yours recorded? Are your
Yes.
so hopefully
Yes.
he could then, if needed, like go and watch it and be like, oh yeah, I was doing that. But it reminds me of, you were mentioning the Seinfeld episode, which was always like the touchstone of how to describe this type of work to people. Um, that's kind of like how the students are in that episode, where they're like gonorrhea, like they're all just like waiting to, "Ah, I know what it is." So that's so funny. I've never actually experienced a student doing that. I've experienced a lot of other things, but that's hilarious.
Yeah, I think he even used the term, he's like, ah, the red herring or something like that.
No.
He did.
Oh
And it
my
was just like,
gosh.
and you could tell also by the way he was conducting the interview that he really was trying to quote unquote figure it out, which again, he just not being like, you know, in that moment in the case, because it was more like, I'll figure this out kind of thing. And it was just like, well, you
Yeah.
might want to just look at that. But, you know,
Yeah.
otherwise he was good. He actually, I did encounter him later, and I was talking to a facilitator who just happened to say something, and we were kind of chuckling about that, his
Yeah.
approach to things there. Yeah. The other thing that we often, and I don't know if you experience this, we laugh ourselves at, like, it's, you know, we do make notes about it, like when they'll get into that habit of like, uh-huh, uh-huh, or awesome, awesome. And it's like, you know,
Yes.
you'll say something like, oh, so I've been having this really bad back pain for the past 2 months. Okay, awesome. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, it actually has been pretty bad. And
Yeah.
it's more of their way, I think, of yes anding you, kind of like,
Yep.
but when it's like that, gotcha, 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 or awesome, you're like, yeah, not really awesome.
Yeah, or great. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, because that is such a thing. It's like, well, this person died. Okay, great. Blah blah blah. It's like you can tell they're just so in their head when they're doing that. That's when you know they're not present with whatever the conversation is. It's because they're like that guy, a red herring. Um, it's just, I would say that if I were to grade him, that this guy that you're talking about, I would probably, I don't know if you guys have checklists in this area, but like ding him on his professionalism. Like, because that to me would be like, oh, he's not taking it seriously. Like, he's taking it seriously in a way, but not as like a, let's treat this as a real life scenario for the future. And I'm sure he did later on and stuff. But yeah, that really tickles me.
Yeah, I couldn't almost, I really was, I probably had a visible smirk on my face because I was trying to hide it. It was just like, uh-huh, mm-hmm. It was like he was this detective or something. Like,
Oh
I
my
almost wanted to
goodness.
picture him with, like, you know, a magnifying glass and like a hat.
Yes, yes. Oh, that's so good.
It
Oh
was
man, these
funny. But
students.
we've had, you know, I mean, there have been definitely some laughs. In fact, well, I'm kind of sad one of our doctors is leaving, and he was
Um,
just someone who had such a great sense of humor. So when there were the more casual settings, and I'm sure you've had these too, where it's not a test and there's
mhm.
small group, they come in, they have to learn something, whether it's like, you know, palpating the abdomen or whatever, I have a scar that they often mistake for a gallbladder scar, but it
Mm.
turns out when I was 6 weeks old, I had pyloric stenosis.
Ooh.
And since I was born in 71, this is before a lot of advancement. So it's a neat scar. It's
Mm.
it's very, not messy, but it's a large scar.
Ah.
So he was like, "What did they use? A machete?" And it's just he was just so like we got to be like, since I've been there so long, like just cracking up. I'm like, "All right, wise guy." But it's those lighthearted moments, or
Yeah.
when they would hear that it was from pyloric stenosis, it would always be cute because they'd be like, "We just learned about that last week," and it's like, yeah,
Right. Which is really cool that you're actually able to say, well, hey, my body went through that. So like that's because not everybody has that. And sometimes when we're teaching the students things as like physical exam uh teaching assistants, like if we do have something specific to us, which a lot of people have something random, right? That can come in handy on occasion. Like people who have a really pronounced JVP or JVD, like the pulse. Um,
mm-hmm.
some people are like, let me show you mine. Because other people, like, you can barely see it and you're shining the light and everything. And, but yeah, it can really come in handy to have these, different things that have happened to us physically.
Yeah. Well, you
Yeah.
mentioned that, or the PMI, which mine they can never usually find. And it's so funny, through the years I've been told different things. I think sometimes it depends on technique and how people are feeling for pulses. Sometimes I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, am I unhealthy?" And then other times I'm like, "Man, I am so healthy."
Yeah.
Because sometimes they're like, "We can't find your pulse." I'm like, "Okay, so it's so slow, it's amazing." And other times they're like, "Oh, that's a good strong pulse." And I often scratch my head and go, "Well, which is it, I wonder?"
Yeah, you kind of want to know. You're like, can we just let's let's make sure that you're healthy because I don't know if this has happened in where you are, but there have been situations where standardized patients who are getting examined, particularly with the medical stuff, uh, they can find things on like med students sometimes will be like, "Oh, you know what? There was a bit of an arrhythmia or whatever when I was listening to the heart." So, they've talked to them afterwards. So it's not completely uncommon if that a student could find something, which is good.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And I think I forget. I mean, obviously, I don't remember if we had to sign anything, but obviously we know they're not doctors, right? So we're not
Right.
supposed to be looking for advice or anything.
Right.
But I do believe something like that at least has happened once or twice. Once I think I had heard that someone spotted a tick bite on a tick or a
Oh,
tick
wow.
bite on one of the patients. And then
Mm.
another time I do know that someone's blood pressure was high enough that I think maybe they sent like one of the faculty members in to say, "Let me check this out," and say, "You know what, you might want to have your blood pressure checked out because it seems kind of high today." So things like that, definitely. Sometimes the other things, depending if it's first year, I might take it with a grain of salt,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially blood pressures,
Oh God.
because they're usually a range, and I'll kind of chuckle because sometimes the faculty member will go, "Is that where yours usually is?" And I'll be like, it's usually lower, but they're just kind of guessing sometimes. It's if they're
Right.
learning, it's but other times they'll say things and it's like, okay, maybe that could be, it's worth knowing, having that information, especially if you hear it a couple times.
Exactly. Yeah. If it tends to be a more common thing, you're like, oh, maybe I should get that checked out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should actually go to the doctor or go to my
Yes.
CVS and see what's going on with the blood pressure.
Yes. So I mentioned earlier, because I do stand up comedy and I do talk about my pelvic exams. Have you ever done
Mm.
any of those delicate, shall we say, exams?
So, oh wow. Okay, so I have questions for you. No, my short answer is I have not done any of like what we call Gouda work, genital urinary
Oh, okay.
teaching assistant, or modeling in that way. Um, I know there's good money in it. I know it's important, and I don't want to be that person. I just don't want to be there with a first year, or even second year, even third year, who doesn't know what they're doing. But do you do that?
Since the pandemic, I will say, and I don't know if this was the same with other schools, they have not gone back to doing that, or with women or men, the prostate exams.
Oh.
I From my understanding is that they're having them work on like they're not called robots. I guess they're I don't know,
Mannequins.
the mannequins. There we go, the sim mannequins. I believe that's what they're having them do. So 2020, the pandemic hit in March. I believe the last one I did would have been the spring of 2019
Okay.
because ours were usually
Wow.
done in the spring. And when I first started, it was probably a couple years in, I did do they probably don't do as much maybe as some of the other schools in DC. They would do prostate exams for men,
Mm,
and they do breast exams, and they do pelvic exams, and
okay.
that's pretty much the whole scope of the more intimate, shall we say, exams. I only did the breast exams 1 year. Now I
Mm,
still joke about it in my stand up because why not? People laugh, but I only did it the 1 year, and they've changed how they do it from what I'm hearing from other women. But it was rather, for me, it was a little too revealing. I just felt, I'm like looking these people in the face and seeing them other times, and I just felt too uncomfortable. Like I literally
yeah.
felt like I was flashing people. I
Like,
did not
well,
feel comfortable. And yet I've had friends say, oh, but you're doing pelvic exams. My philosophy was
oh.
their head is down toward my feet. They're not like
Ah!
really looking me in the eye. There was like a barrier. I truly felt, and you've
Yeah.
got the gown on, but I
Yeah.
did that for, oh gosh, I want to say, so 2019 was the last time. I want to say for at least 3 or 4 years, and my record is
Wow.
11 pelvic exams in one day because
No.
somebody did not show up for her shift, and they were
Oh
like,
my.
Janine, do you want to do another set? And I said, okay.
Wow. Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. I
It
just
is a lot. It is
do-
a lot. Yeah,
they pay you better for that, right?
absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Just want to make sure. Um,
Yes. Yeah. The
yeah.
shift is like 30 minutes, even though you're being paid for like four, and they're paying you at more than double the rate.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Okay,
Yeah.
good, good, good.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
why I
Wow.
joke about doing it, because it was, I mean, and again, they do need to learn. And I will
Yeah.
say, again, they run it very professionally. But I did get to know some of the doctors, the OBGYNs, and it was pretty funny because that week I was there twice. And when he saw me, he's like, wow, were you sore from yesterday?
I
I said,
imagine
yes,
you
I was.
were. Yeah. I can't even like I that's the thing for me. The reason I don't do it is, yeah, I probably would feel a little weird, like, just showing everything to people, but it's actually more the comfort thing. It's not even the I don't want people to see down there or what have you. It's more that I don't trust anyone. I barely trust my doctors to do like when I'm getting a pap smear, I'm just like, this is uncomfortable for me. I don't want to get paid to do it. I don't want to do it. I will do it for my health when I have to do it. Like that is truly how I feel. But there are some people that I think just and maybe you're one of those people who you must to some extent be that just maybe it's not quite as uncomfortable or you're just more open to I don't know. Like yeah, the fact that you're able to do 11 in one day is incredibly impressive to me.
Now, I will tell you this though, 2019 was the last year. If they do bring it back, I cannot tell you that I will go back to it, just because
Mhm,
I'm getting crankier. I am turning
mhm,
52 in a couple weeks. So now truly with perimenopause, I am not as joyful as I
mhm,
used to be.
mhm.
Now, I do get a little bit crankier, so I don't know if I'll have the patience for it or the comfort for it,
Yeah.
because it's not that it wasn't uncomfortable. It was, but I didn't mind it. And
Mhm.
again, to be honest, it was, it's good money.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it did get a little uncomfortable because they did have to learn how to use a speculum. And
Mhm.
that was usually the quick part. But then they had to palpate for your uterus and your ovaries. That
Ooh.
was the more uncomfortable part because,
Yeah.
especially, I will say, some of the men having larger hands and it being
Oh
uncomfortable,
gosh.
that
Yeah.
truly was. So yeah, I can't say
Wow.
if they do it again, if they go back to it, I don't know if I'll return,
Yeah.
honestly.
But you really do like it's really cool that you have been able to do that because I really do have mad respect for people that like that's just something again, I'm sure gun to my head I could do it like but I don't want to. So I'm just but there needs to be people like you or others who that do give students that opportunity because they need it. It's so
Yeah.
important. So then when they're out in the real world, they're not learning with a speculum or palpating. Yeah, and I also wonder if like the men with the big hands, like maybe they go into a different area of medicine. Maybe they don't. I don't know, but maybe they kind of realize like, oh, my hands are big. Like I'm getting complaints from, like discomfort. I don't know. I'd be curious to find out how that works, but
I do hope, not necessarily for my sake, but for the sake of the future, I hope they'll have them return to doing it on real patients, just because I do think they need to see a variety of different, what it looks like on different women,
yeah.
not just the simulated mannequin that looks the same. And I know that I'm sure they can probably do things to create different scenarios with it, but I think it's important. It's not just seeing, the vaginal area or ovaries or the cervix or whatever, but being communication skills are key with this, because you're in an intimate kind of position there. And one thing they used to teach them is, okay, now tell her, okay, you're going to feel my hands now outside, and talking through it, I think, is so important, so that you do have that good bedside manner and that you are making
Mhm.
the patient feel comfortable. So my hope is that they will return to doing it with real people.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point, and I hope they do too. I have a feeling they probably will, if if it was successful in the past,
Mm.
but but who knows? It is 2023 now, so I guess we'll see. When you all, how did you deal with the pandemic? Were you doing virtual role playing and SP encounters?
Yeah, I will say I was actually surprised how quickly they bounced back with that, because it
Mm,
just seemed pretty quick. I know in March it's very vivid in my mind, because at that time I was still I taught part-time at King's
mm.
College, and we went virtual, and everything's like the world seemed to shut down. March 13th, it was a Friday.
Yep,
I was
yep.
actually at the medical college. We had I think we had OSCEs, we had testing,
Mm.
and we were all, of course, nervous and just talking amongst ourselves about like what's going to go on, what's going to happen. And I want to say, I don't even think it took them a month. They started doing, I remember one of the first things I did was cognitive tests, and I
Mhm.
think we were even doing it, I want to say there were some doctors from New Jersey. Like, I think, I don't even know what that was really all about. It might have been
Huh.
a mix of different students, but they were basically interviewing us through Zoom and
Mm.
having us, they had sent us through email the cognitive test, draw a clock, do all that kind of stuff. And they were doing that at first. And then that May, they did their OSCEs online, and they were
Ah,
recording them through Zoom, and they had like the
uh-huh.
breakout rooms and all that. So
Yep.
we went to virtual pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. Same with us. And it's funny that you say on March 13th because I remember that day. I was also at George Washington University at their STEM Center. And I think the day before I was there, and everybody was there together, the fourth years and us SPs doing a case. And then the following day, the 13th, we were there, but they said the students weren't going to come in. So we sat in encounter rooms and the students somehow zoomed in. Maybe I don't know if it was with Zoom, but somehow like had a way, and we did this weird version of the encounter. And they were fourth years; they were ready to go anyway. But then within after that, of course, everything shut down. And then we with one of the universities, with Georgetown University, they bounced back really quickly in May. Which I guess is not as quickly as it could have been, but still, like all things considered, we were doing a ton of cases virtual and even using the virtual nature to make it work in the way that like they had some SPs like not know how to do Zoom. Sorry, I shouldn't be away from my microphone, but like that they would be not looking at the camera and not speaking to the camera, and they kind of played with that a little bit. Or there was one that I did that was with them that had like a sick baby at home, and we were actually telehealthing on purpose because we didn't want to bring the baby in to this potential COVID like environment. And so like that definitely was able to pivot well in some cases. But I did so many online encounters for the next couple of years. Did you all when did you go back in person?
We went back, oh gosh, I feel like we went back that fall to some degree.
Wow. Okay.
I'm trying to think if it was that soon, because I feel like it might have been, and I could be, how things, time is just kind of like jumbled, but I
Yes.
do think we did, but we had like serious like we had the eye goggle, like the goggles on. They changed things as far as you weren't in the usual exam rooms, you were in a bigger room, like a
Ah.
conference room. So,
Mhm.
and there was of course hand sanitizer everywhere. Because I do remember when I did go, a lot of people did not. Like a
Yeah.
lot of SPs were not comfortable. And I did go. And I want to say it was that fall, and I could be mistaken, but I think it was. But with the masks and with,
Yeah.
a certain grade mask, of course, a certain level, and with the goggles and with the gloves, I think it was that fall. I'm almost positive, and we did that. And then it was really up until very recently we were wearing masks up until
Mm-hmm.
just a few months ago.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Um, yeah. I don't think I went back in person until sometime in 2021. But I will say that because I was a standardized patient, and particularly because I was a standardized patient instructor, meaning teaching the med students, I got my vaccinations earlier than a lot of people. So I think I got my first one for COVID vaccine in early February of 2021. And I would not have been able to get it that early if it wasn't for standardized patient work, which is really ironic. So that was, but they were like trying to get us back into the schools as soon as possible. And we also did all that PPE. We had like the masks and then the face shields. But we were in tinier rooms with some of these. They were not very big rooms. And there was a lot of back and forth, I will say. Some of the SPs were not, there was a lot of like, how are you all going to help us? How are you all going to protect us when everything first shut down and all of our work? And this wasn't stemming from me, but I was part of this whole thing of, you know, all of our work is gone. We had, and some people had just had children. I had not at this point, but, so there was a lot of, I mean, fear from everybody, of course, all over the world, but particularly from independent contractors. And I think SPs were just like, oh, wow, I had, a couple months booked and I expected more to come. And now, as far as I know, indefinitely it's gone and maybe virtual. But when it first shut down, we didn't even know that that was going to be on the table right away, of course. So, yeah, it was a wild time. And I'm glad that we're on the other side of it and that people are, yeah, able to go back and not even have to wear masks now.
Yeah.
That's
And
nice.
we were actually just, I think, and just until recently, like with the masks. So as far as our exams, they were not doing like looking in the mouth.
Yeah.
Now I believe they're allowing them to do it because now they said masks are optional. But otherwise, before that, if it was a case that, the person might have had something, respiratory or whatever, if the student said, it was one of those where, oh, if I looked in your mouth, would I find anything unusual? And they would give a card if there was a
Ah,
finding,
yes.
but they didn't allow looking in the mouth or touching the eyes or anything
Hmm.
really up until just a couple months ago. Yeah.
So it was all verbal. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which I will say to some in it's not ideal, of course, but there is some advantage of kind of learning to say it because then it's kind of more ingrained in many ways. Like, so you don't, I don't know. And I don't know the study on this, so I might just be making all of this up. But this is how I feel about it. Like, if they have to say this checklist out, so, and then you're responding with you have a card or you're telling them the result, um, it's a different way of learning, I guess, that can
Yeah.
be beneficial.
Yeah, I think it's beneficial, definitely. Well, we used to, and we've changed this for the longest time. We used to do physical exams that were graded. So it was head to toe, and there were like 86 items on the checklist. I don't know exactly why. And we've had different faculty have taken over different programs. So they no longer do that. They learn, excuse me, all the parts head to toe,
Mhm.
but we don't do that physical exam anymore. And we used to do it. And I know they used to teach a lot of students to say it out loud so they wouldn't forget. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking, I know for myself, when we were grading them, I loved it because it made me aware of what they were doing. Now, of
Yes.
course, if they're saying, okay, now I'm checking your femorals and they're feeling behind your knee, you're like, no, you're not. And you still have to like go, no, that's the popliteal. But otherwise it was a good way for them, and they would go head to toe. And it's like, I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to look in your ears, and now I'm feeling your trachea if it's midline and all that.
Mhm.
And that was great. And I think it was
Yeah.
important. The only thing that I know would throw some of the students is they would also tell them then in the real world, or when you're talking to a patient, not to use jargon. But in some cases for this, we didn't ding them for that
Yeah.
because it was more like, okay, I'm going to verbalize this. So I know what I'm doing and I'm letting the SP know. And it did help. I found that it was
Yeah.
helpful.
And hopefully also for them, they then had more encounters after that where they could start to kind of loosen up on the jargon so they could work with saying it, in more layman's terms. One would hope. But yeah, you're right. There's something really nice about, or like when a student summarizes after they've gotten all this stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, good, they had to ask. Yeah, especially for those long exam days. Those are the ones where it's really tricky. Like that's why I love formative encounters where we're not grading them, because it's just the best. It's like just practice. I'm here to give you feedback afterwards, and I'll do written, but I love verbal feedback. It's just my favorite thing to do when I have the opportunity. But it sounds like you guys only do written feedback.
No, we have formatives too, but they're it's different. So if it's like a small group, we sometimes, depending on the facilitator, they might say, "Do you have any feedback for the student?"
Mm.
Or like they might take their turn, whatever the particular week might be. Is it a neuro or is it, muscular skeletal, and how they do the approach? Like we're allowed to offer feedback, and then we have the sessions that are more. I think they call them more communication sessions, where they're again a group, so
Hmm.
there might be five students, but they each take a turn interviewing. And a lot of times they'll do
Yeah.
that with the first years. So we're supposed to stay in character, but we can give them feedback as the patient. So if my name is Karen Smith
Oh.
and I'm here because I've got a sore throat or whatever the case might be, I'm sharing, the person gets to sit there, ask questions, and then with their first year, they get to time out. So if they're stuck, they can turn and look at their fellow classmates and their facilitator and say,
Mhm.
I don't know where else to go, and then they can get feedback. They could turn to me and continue, and then they're
Mhm.
allowed to say, but the way we've handled is they can't just look at us and go, so how did I do, or something like that. They have to
Yeah.
have more of a specific question.
Oh,
Did
uh-huh.
the how did this go? Did you feel judged when I asked you this, or
Mhm.
was I professional? They can ask specific questions, but just not like, well, how was that? We're not supposed to be like,
Mhm.
oh, you did great. We could say, oh yes, I liked that you were empathetic, or I like that you, because
Yeah.
sometimes it's a case of wanting us to quit smoking or whatever, like, oh, I like that you
Mhm.
didn't get judgy, or I like that, we're allowed to offer feedback in that scenario. I didn't feel judged, or I didn't feel whatever,
Right.
but we don't give like just general feedback.
Okay. Yeah. And what I found is like typically when we're doing the more general feedback on, at least at some of the schools, what I love to ask is like, well, how did you feel about it first? Because that gives me so much information of like, okay, oh, they weren't aware that this thing happened. I'm gonna have to touch base. I'm gonna have to touch on that, or like they are aware of it. I'm not gonna harp on it. That type of stuff. But yeah, it makes sense that you all are answering specific questions too, because that makes your lives a little bit easier as standardized patients, but also probably there's a bit of quality control on the facilitator's end of like, rather than it potentially being like, so SP, how did I do? And then the SP might be like, you were good. Like, which of course we're all told like don't do that. But keeping it specific and measurable and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And we can always, if it's, obviously we're always told that if there's a concern, we let, our, her name is Kate, she runs the sim center, like, make her aware of things. But if it's a test, we also always have paper in a folder under the keyboard in the room, so that if we have a concern that's not meant for the student's eyes, or meant like, Kate, like she'll tell us to use that. It's like, oh my gosh, it was the fourth student, and I just kind of was zoning out for a minute, and I don't recall. I feel like they listened to all six areas, but I'm not sure. You could leave her a note, or you could even say something strange happened in the room. The person
Hmm.
did this, and I just don't know, and I don't know how to grade them. Like, we're always allowed and encouraged to leave that kind of feedback so that she can watch the tape or
Yeah.
have a conversation or something like that.
That's really good. Yeah, at one of the schools I work at, they do a thing where after the normal stuff, where you then could write written feedback for the student's eyes, etc. But then there's another question that happens after, like, do you have any concerns about the student? Like, no concerns, possible concerns, strong concerns, and uh, that is just for not the student. Sorry, I should say that is just for the facilitators, teachers, sim center people, like not for the students to ever see. So it could be like, here's the concern that, yeah, that could be sensitive or could be just, they just need to work on this thing and it's very apparent, but I need to make that very clear.
Yeah.
Not from my tactful feedback earlier, but from this, like, let's talk. I am curious, so how many people or how many standardized patients are in your center, in your program? Do you know?
Yeah, so Well, I shouldn't say I know exactly how many, but I do know it's been growing because our number of students have been growing.
Oh.
The college opened in, I believe, well, I guess it would have been 2009 or 2010 it opened, and the classes have been growing. The amount of medical students has been growing each year. So we probably have, well, and again, by comparison to DC, I'm sure it might seem small, but I believe we have like, do we have about 75 or 80
Well, that's good.
SPs? Yeah, because our classes, I'm trying to think of the med students. I know the one class had like 100. And again,
Mm.
I'm sure for compared to a bigger school, that's not a lot. But for us, because it's been growing each year, it's been getting bigger.
Wow, that's and it's funny because if you were to ask me the same thing, I wouldn't have an answer for you. I'm realizing just due to the different places I work, I'm because it's a little bit more like here and there and everywhere. I'm not as aware of how many people, but that leads me to my next question of like, do you feel like you know all the standardized patients, who they are, and do you know them pretty well? Do you all hang out? Are you friends, etc.?
So it's funny because I mentioned earlier there's a lot of like retired people,
Mhm.
and so while I am 52, a lot of these are playing like, I don't play a lot of the 60 some cases or 70 some. I've played some of them, but
Mhm.
because they're short on the 20 sums, I'm
Right.
playing like a
Yeah.
28-year-old every now and again. So there are some of the, I just happens to be some of the older folks that like they'll always be in together for a certain case, and some of them, like we did have an SP luncheon.
Oh.
This was actually, I think this is the first year they did it, and it was very nice. And there were some people there, and I'm like, I've never seen that woman before in my life. And I was surprised because there were maybe 8 to 10 women that I didn't know. But
Uh-huh.
otherwise, I do know most of the SPs. And because I've been there for, oh gosh, 12 years,
Mhm.
I've become friends with many of the SPs. In
Mhm.
fact, a few of
Mhm.
them have come to see my comedy shows.
Oh,
One of
cool.
them has been in my house a few times and given me plants when she's digging them out of her yard, Linda. And then I've had the some of the ladies here. And in fact, I've
Cool.
had one woman who's been on my podcast at least 3 times because she's
Oh,
like a local historian and she does things at the cemetery. So
oh
yeah, we've
wow.
become, and the other woman, I'm going to her wedding in a couple weekends.
Oh my
So we
gosh.
have become, a lot of us have become close.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know most of them. There's just some that I don't know, and
Yeah.
others I
Yeah.
just don't know as well.
Sure. Yeah. Because especially if people are coming in that are newer, they haven't been there as much, or you're not doing very different cases, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. I love like hearing about the dynamics of SP programs, but that's lovely that they had a luncheon for you. That's really nice.
Yeah, it was, well, we used to do it kind of ourselves. There were, and of
Mm-hmm,
course we
hmm.
excluded the men folk, which which was fine by me. But no, like the ladies would get together. It was just the ladies, and we would do
Yeah.
it usually at Christmas time. And for
Oh.
several years we'd try to include, and that's too when it was smaller. There weren't as many
Mhm,
women. So
mhm.
maybe there'd be 15 or 20 women and we'd get together. And then sometimes, the past few summers, we'd like a group of us maybe would get together for lunch at a restaurant or
Oh,
whatever.
fun.
And this was the first year that they actually held a luncheon for us, which was really nice. I think it was in, I want to say early June. And I think
Sure.
this year was kind of unique for us because instead of having our OSCE in May, it was in July.
Mm.
So we had a little lull there. We had the luncheon, and then a lot of us were coming back in July for about almost 3 weeks in
Oh,
July to do
interesting.
the
Yeah.
OSCE.
Yeah. I think it's just really heartening to hear that they do that because like I think some programs are better at that kind of thing than others. And it's makes I think this is probably true with all jobs. I've never had like a typical 9 to 5 job, but I imagine like that it just feels good to be appreciated sometimes, and especially when you're doing this kind of work, which can be super rewarding, but is also kind of exhausting. And you kind of feel like a cog in the wheel sometimes because obviously we're part of a bigger thing that they're doing, which is part important. So that's, yeah, that makes me really happy that you all.
Yeah, they do show their appreciation. We'll get like a little gift each year at Christmas,
Oh
or I should
my
say in the new
gosh.
year. I shouldn't say Christmas, the new year. Just like,
Sure. Yeah.
like it was little notebooks this year. We've gotten little flashlights. We've gotten,
What?
different gifts like that every year.
That's so
Water
cute.
bottles. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is like, oh, this is even better than I thought. There are some places that I work that are really, I don't know if I've ever gotten a gift like that though, but are just they take better care of their SPs than other places, and you really, I guess all that to say, like when I'm at a place where I don't feel very taken care of, I'm less I feel less loyal to that program. I'm less, not to say that I'm not going to do a good job when I'm there, but I'm less inclined to take work there because it's just like, well, I'd rather work with the people that really appreciate me and like make it known and are, so yeah, I'm glad that they have that for you all. And that's something I hope that maybe someone else out there can hear that and runs a sim center and can take that idea and run with it.
Well, and it's funny, it's always the grass is always greener because you're saying that. And yet through the years, we have, because, you get used to what you get used to,
Yeah.
complaints that, feeling
Oh,
underappreciated. And
of
here,
course.
it's different from what you've experienced. I mean, there was a time when we first started, there was always snacks too. They used to always have
Mhm.
snacks in the SP room, and then that went away. And of course, people were like, complaining. And I'm thinking, I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect. I don't throw stones, but it's just like that was a perk. They don't have to give us snacks. You know what I mean? They
True.
don't have to do that. They did
True.
bring them back though recently. So see, so it's
Oh.
nice.
That is nice. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, and it just depends. Like there are certain schools that I work for that there are different types of perks. Like, oh, this place they have a Keurig, so like we can have as much coffee as we want. Like, and we don't have to bring it in. But other places where they're more likely to, support us in other wonderful ways. But there's not. You have to bring in your own coffee if you want it, and even then, it's not in the best place to do it because the students might be walking. So like it's just yeah, it's funny, and I love hearing about how other sim centers are run, because it's fascinating to me because it is still a newer world in that way, the profession and the whole sim center thing. While standardized patient work has been around technically since the 60s, but barely. Like that's I think when the first one happened, but I would say it's more like in the past 10 to 20 years. Yeah, that it's really taken off and opened up. Like you said, the place that you work is open in what, 2010?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think more and more med schools are just seeing the value and the benefit of, even if it's a small program, of like bringing in some sort of simulated standardized patients, uh and it's just getting better and better, I think, overall for the quality of our healthcare,
I
upcoming
agree.
healthcare providers.
Yeah, absolutely. As we start to wind down, I want to ask, what do you think, I mean, and we have talked a little bit about it. We've learned, different things about our health, and we feel like we're, making a difference, obviously. What do you think is one of the most rewarding things, or things that you've appreciated through the time you've done it?
I have to say, so yeah, definitely the easy answer is feeling like I'm making a difference in our future doctors, etc. But the thing that really was super special to me that I did not get the opportunity to feel and see until the pandemic, oddly, was when I was a standardized patient instructor for a first year. And I saw this girl come in as a first year and I kind of worked with her, taught her a lot, and some other people in her group. And after we're done working with them, you may not see them again, or you might see them in random encounters. However, I didn't see her again until one of her final encounters, her fourth year. It was during the pandemic and it was a virtual one, but I saw her and she was so good. And we actually like got to, I think it was, we sent an email afterwards because I don't think there was a feedback portion. And it just like made my heart so happy to see that journey of somebody from essentially the first day ish of their first year to basically they've already been matched with a place and they're moving on and they become a really great uh future doctor, soon to be. Yeah, so that was probably the most like tangibly rewarding thing for me.
That's
How about
really cool.
how about you?
That's really special. Yeah, honestly, I will say, when they show or say something that lets you're reminded of how appreciative they are. I
Mhm.
think, and I mean, again, I'm not going to lie, this has helped supplement my income. When I first started, I mean, I was trying to get my business off the ground. And so through the years I've done, as I've said, various gig life, and right now
Uh-huh.
I'm doing more, excuse me, making more of a living with my marketing work, but I still take it because it's been a really good experience. Everyone there has been wonderful. I love working with the students, and it is cool to see their eyes light up when they see something, like when they're looking in your eyes for that red reflex in the back, your
Yes.
pupils, and they're like, I don't see it. I don't see, oh my God. Yeah, I see it. Or they feel up, and they literally get like, oh wow, that's cool. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of, it's nice. And when they're like, wow, thank you so much. This is helpful. You're doing something good. And again, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to be like a medical Mother Teresa, but it does feel good to know that you're helping and to know that they're
Yeah.
appreciating. And you see
Yeah.
them literally light up, which is kind of cool.
That is really cool. I totally agree. That's such a fun experience to like watch them figure out something. And it's really like, and it does happen quite a bit, even if it's the guy being like, that's a red herring or gotcha. Aha.
Aha, it's the thyroid. I knew it.
but, but like, it is really special. And there's something really kind of neat about also knowing that there is this kind of sprawling web, for lack of a better way to put it, of standardized patients in the country and in the world that are doing and are in a similar boat. The sim centers may be different. Cases obviously are going to be somewhat different, but there's still going to be a lot of the same types of cases, and that we're part of this network in many ways. Almost feels like a secret society. If you meet another SP, it's like, whoa, oh my gosh, we got to talk. Like, this is cool, because so many people do not know about it. And it's this fascinating little gig career for some, job, however you want to put it, that does make a difference and is fun. And you get to meet so many cool people. Some are actors, some are not, but everybody is there for, relatively the same reason, relatively. And yeah, it makes me very happy when I hear other people get excited about it too. And then also, like what you said, when the student they get to nerd out on something, and like we get to nerd out on that too, and obviously I'm a big old nerd because I have a podcast about standardized patient work. So like, wow, I really went there. But like, it's so interesting. And I guess my hope, and this is why I appreciate you having me and talking with me about it and sharing your stories too, is that more and more people can understand the importance of standardized patients and what we bring to the table as a whole, as a community, to sim centers and to med schools, that more people should know about, because it's cool, it's interesting, and it's helpful.
Yeah, I agree. One last question, and then I want you to share a little bit about your podcast so people know
Sure.
where to find it and what, when you publish it.
Yeah.
Why do you think so many people, and we both have experienced this, when we tell people, they're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Why do you think, I know it's different, but what else do you think it is about this kind of work that makes people like so curious?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think maybe because there are so many variables to it, that would be my guess of like, it's like that, wait, you're acting like a patient, but then how do they do the medical stuff on you? Like, how do they do this? How do you deal with that? Like, there's just so many avenues and detours that it could go down in terms of what questions they could ask of and how you answer them, because there are so many variables to this job. So I think part of it is that the fact that they don't know it exists often. So the fact that it's like we're opening up a whole new world. But then also, once they know it exists, like, I don't even know where to begin. That type of thing
Yeah.
of like, well, wait, okay, how do what question do I? It's like when you really don't know anything about a certain profession. Sometimes I joke about my husband being a businessman, like, and he is a businessman, but I do know what he does. But it's that same idea of like, well, I don't really know the ins and outs. So I think it might be people just being like, it's, that joke of, I think it was from 30 Rock, where it's about scuba diving, and they're like, it's a whole nother world down there. Did you ever? No. Okay. But
I did watch the show, but that's not one I know. Is talk to me about Seinfeld, and I'll have that memorized, or The
fair
Office.
enough. The Office, of course, Scranton, right?
Of course.
But it's that idea of like, I learned how to scuba dive in 2016, And I was always like scared of it. And I finally did it. And I was like, oh my gosh, it is a whole nother world down here. Like now I know what questions to ask, and now I know more about it. And so sorry, that took a weird detour, but
That's okay. You don't know what you don't know.
exactly. So I guess that's the answer. I've never
Yeah.
been told I was concise.
Hey, that is just fine. No, but I will say every person I tell, I without fail, they're like, that's so cool. Like, and I think you're right. They have never, for the most part, are not familiar. And I mean, you're not familiar. And that idea of like, how are you a pretend patient? Like, I think they wonder how it works. Like,
Right.
how do you portray things? Like, it's like, no, I
Yeah.
don't really have to have an arrhythmia, but you know,
Right. Thank goodness. That would be really hard for them to do if they
I
had to
can't really
hire
fake
people.
that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I mean, I was interviewed. I was on Conan O'Brien's podcast, Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend,
Oh,
in
wow.
November of 2021. Um, and it was because I'm a standardized patient. I had written in because he was doing these Conan O'Brien Needs a Fan podcast, which are part of his, like, the umbrella, and I'm a huge fan of his. And so I said, well, I would love to talk to him. I don't expect to get on his podcast. Like, of course, I'd never been on a podcast before that one, mind you, which is ironic. And I wrote in and I just said, you know what? This is kind of an interesting angle. Like, I have a lot of identities. Like, I'm an actor, I'm a personal trainer, I'm a group exercise instructor, I, do X, Y, and plenty other stuff. But I said, but you know what? This is the most interesting thing, I think, if I were to have an angle to talk about to someone who deals with actors all the time. Much bigger actors, bigger names than Katie Culligan. And so I wrote in about it, and his team and him found it very interesting, and they interviewed me. And so that was like the beginning of like, oh my gosh, now it's actually getting some airtime because a lot of people listen to that podcast. And soon after that, we had already recorded a lot of our podcast, the Standardized Patients podcast, but we hadn't released it at that point. So I was like, I can't promote my podcast on his podcast. Like, that's not that's not kosher. So but within the next, I don't know, 4 months, we started releasing ours. And I was like, well, hey, at least there's a jumping off point, like from a bigger podcast to the little podcast that could.
That is awesome. So November 2021, I'll have to look for that. Conan O'Brien's podcast.
Yeah. So it's called the episode is called The Professional Patient. And it's under Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. And it was actually released on December 9th of 2021, which is funny because that was actually my due date because I was very pregnant when he interviewed me. And I actually gave birth early. So by the time it came out, I was actually like had the baby and was like, I guess we're listening to it together. Like, so that was
That's
the
really
due
cool.
date for the podcast release. But yeah, definitely check it out because he's funny and it's fun. And it was a very cool experience. But yeah, so our podcast is not that, but we do get into we have a lot of fun with the Standardized Patients podcast, but it does get definitely into the nitty gritty of, the nuances and complexities of this life and this world and in different roles. Like we talk to a ton of standardized patients, such as yourself, but also standardized patient trainers, other educators, people who do that GUDA work, the genital urinary stuff. Forensic science is a recent one. So like, it's just we've been covering a lot of topics, and in season 2 we broke down, which is our current season, we broke down a little bit more of like, what does a typical day look like as a standardized patient, or what does a typical exam day look like? What is a case? Like things like that the average person might not know. Like, so you're explaining what a SP is to someone who doesn't do it, and using all this jargon, just like med school and med students, that we have to be like, oh, wait a second, they don't know what a case is. They don't know what an encounter is. Maybe they don't know what an encounter room is. Like all of these things that we're like, okay, let's back up. Let's simplify things. So our hope is also in the future that people can be explaining it and be like, well, hey, here's actually an episode about what this is. The person may not want to listen to an episode about what a case is, but they can. And we have
That's
fun with
great.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. In fact, as I'm thinking tonight, we we used case and we said sim center. So maybe I'll put something in the show notes to explain that a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what's really great is my podcast co-producer and my podcast partner, Catherine, who does all of like the audio engineering and editing, and she's wonderful, our graphic designs. She When I would be interviewing guests, she will be on the call but muted and off camera, and she'll send me chats like, "Hey, can you describe what this is?" Or like, "Can you ask the person this?" So she's been a really like thinking of like a stage manager of like, let's clarify this in real time so I can, because again, yeah, when we're in the world of SP work, like we don't even think about the abbreviations we're using and the terms what the normal person might be like, what? And then they might tune out, because it can get a little crazy and overwhelming and just like it's weird. It's weird.
Well, and I think I would imagine not just SPs, but I think anyone in the medical field, though, could definitely be interested in what you're talking about and definitely relate, I'm sure.
That was our hope. We recently released a podcast where we had most of our season 2 guests give advice to med students. Uh, and that was a fun montage one that we recently released. We're like, hey, let's this one's for the med students. This one, and it's for other people too. But we do hope that, maybe some, not just med students and not just standardized patients, but healthcare professionals, people that are interested maybe in getting into it or just learning more about it, like the weird odd jobs. Like that's the kind of thing that we knew when we made this podcast, that it was not going to be a wild popular podcast that was going to relate to a lot of the population. But we also noted there wasn't a podcast that was about standardized patients. Like in this very, very oversaturated market of the podcast world, we actually found a hole. And that was pretty cool, that it was a hole that I knew a lot about. And so that kind of worked out. And obviously, we're connecting with people. So I appreciate you having me on here to be able to talk about it and spread the word to your listeners too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when I saw that you had that, I listened to a couple episodes, but I was like, it took me a while and I'm like, I've never talked about it on my podcast. I think we need to talk.
Yeah. Yeah. And this will actually be, so the Conan O'Brien one was the first one, still oddly, but then I was a guest recently on someone else's kind of a health related podcast, and now this one. So it's really cool that like, so kind of a weird story, but back before the pandemic, I kept saying, gosh, I would love to be a guest on someone's podcast. I was like, how do I make that happen? Like it was just a random pipe dream that I was like, I don't have a podcast. I don't know any people that have podcasts. I don't, but, and then all of a sudden here we are, like fast forward to now, it's like podcast. But it's cool how like, the domino, it just keeps the balls rolling, whatever metaphor you want to use.
Plug in metaphor here.
Yeah.
You know what? I think it's super cool. And as you said, it is podcasts. It is a saturated kind of thing. It is, there's a lot of noise out there. Also social media everywhere, but I think people gravitate towards something, or they might try it out and maybe they won't think that they'll like it. And then they turn out that they do, or vice versa. So I think as I always say, there's something out there for everyone. So like, I always encourage people, if you haven't liked my podcast, share it with someone anyway, because maybe they'll like it.
Exactly. I love the Mike Birbiglia podcast. Do you know the comedian Mike Birbiglia?
I don't know his podcast, but I did see a special of his on Netflix, and I had heard of him but never saw his comedy. I saw it and I was blown away. I'm like, oh my God, he's
So
funny.
good. Was it the new one?
I'm trying to think. I saw it this past April, and I think it might have been new, or it could have been an old one that we just popped. It just happened to come up, but it was very funny.
Yeah. So he has this great podcast that like, and especially as a comedian, I am not, but as you are, you might want to check it out. I love how I'm like plugging someone random's podcast on your podcast, but it's called Working It Out, and he deals with like a lot of like stand up. He's a stand-up, of course, as you know, and then he deals with other stand-ups, and they work out material on it. But my point to this was, he always says at the end of his podcast, tell your friends, tell your enemies, like, so I love that. Like,
Yeah.
just tell
Uh-huh.
people, or
I put that in my show notes actually,
do
whether a
you?
friend
Oh,
or
that's so
foe, I do
I love
actually,
it.
because
Okay,
it's
well then
like
you're on the same wavelength.
we're on the same wavelength. So I should reach out to him.
You should.
One of my favorite podcasts, and it's also a comedian, is Tig Notaro.
Oh,
Don't
yes.
Ask Tig. I love her. And then she does a podcast, although they haven't updated it recently, with Cheryl Hines, where they talk
Oh,
about documentaries, but it's funny because they half the time they don't get to what's in the documentary
of
because
course.
they're
Yeah.
just being silly chatting. But I really love Don't Ask Tig because the guests, I love just the way she talks with them. So, it's just comfortably. And then the
Mhm.
advice they give the people who call in or, write in are really some pretty good advice. I love how seriously her guests take it. Like
Oh, that's
they're
good.
so
Yeah.
thoughtful overall, which I love. I love listening to that every week.
That is really cool. I'm gonna have to check that out. I've definitely seen it on my podcast, like browsing. So I'll make a point to listen to that one. But I have to ask really quickly, how much material do you use of your standardized patient work in your stand up?
So now, and I'm sure you're probably told this too, like we're not supposed to discuss cases, and there's that word again. So basically a case, like if I'm a patient portraying a certain illness, for example, that would be like a case. We're not supposed to, because they don't want other students to learn things ahead of time or get any kind of advantage, whatever. And I don't talk about names, I don't talk about specific, I'm talking about an experience of basically just saying, okay, hey, this is what's happening at
Mhm.
at colleges. They're doing breast exams, they're doing pelvic exams, so that's not revealing anything. But
Yeah.
those two things are right now the thing I've been doing the longest, that have been
Mm.
in my act. I talk about that, I'm like, oh, I didn't know if I should do it, and then it's like, why the hell not? I've been letting losers do it for free for years, like being felt up kind of thing. And like, and then I talk about I didn't know what to wear to a gang pap, that kind of thing. So I talk about those two things. And I honestly, here's the thing. It's funny because I feel like it's a gold mine, and yet I've only done those two topics.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think I need to, I think part of it I want to say is laziness. I'm going to throw myself under the bus. And the other part is just like where to begin. Like I do think I could probably do a whole 30 minutes or more on that, but I need to get a little more less lazy but
Sure,
more
right,
creative
right.
and just writing. Because I mean, I do want to talk about, like I was told by this one doctor, she didn't mean anything by it and I love her, but like I have hobbit feet
Oh,
because
okay.
I have hair on my toes. And
Wait,
she's
doesn't
saying that's
everybody?
genetic, and she has hobbit feet, and I'm thinking, god, I'm glad I'm not sensitive here.
Jeez,
But like
yeah.
stuff like that. And I mean, so many times I've been told, like, I have a great ear canal, which I just think is hysterical. Like, I have a great ear canal, you can see the white or the whatever, the gray, whatever, the pearly light or whatever they talk
Yeah,
about.
yeah, exactly.
So
The
I'm just like,
membrane.
do you have a great ear canal? I do.
I was told today that. That's awesome. Yeah.
Stuff like that. And it's just like, again, it's like, I will admit, it's just not, you do your certain stuff and it hits very well. The things I do get is what I close with, and it usually gets a good laugh. So,
Ah.
but I'm like, I really do need to sit down and start doing a little bit more about this.
Yeah, yeah, workshopping some new SP stuff. I like that. I like that. Well, if you do, you gotta let me know. I'd love to if you do footage of it. I don't know, but
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. In fact, I'll send you a link to
please do.
to a bit. Yeah, absolutely. But
That
now
would
I
be
think
really
you've
fun.
inspired me to, because it is, you do get comfortable and you do get lazy and time runs out. But like I have through the years, I've thought of like, okay, maybe I should mention that I've been told I have hobbit feet. Maybe I should talk
Yeah.
about that.
By the way, I have hair on my toes too, just for what it's worth. Like a little bit, not a ton, but like a little bit.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not like I can comb mine or braid it or anything, but it's just like when she said that, I was like, geez. I mean, and honest to God, I loved her. She was really nice and everything. And I didn't mind that she said it, but I was just like, I'm glad I'm not sensitive.
Seriously, because some people might go home and be like, "Oh, what do I do about my feet?"
I
And you still,
know.
even if you're not sensitive about it, you still remember it because it is a ridiculous thing for someone to
Uh-huh.
tell you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere. It's sticking in my brain.
Yeah, those things will do that. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much. So so your podcast, does it come out at certain times just so we know for people to look for it?
Yeah. So actually, we are just going to be finishing our season 2 very shortly. I think our final episode of season 2 will be releasing early to mid September. We usually
Okay.
release on Mondays. Um, so depending on when this is released, and then we'll be in touch about then what's coming next. But right now, I would definitely encourage people if they are interested in hearing more about standardized patient work, and we do get a lot of funny stories from different people. Like that has been a real fun thing, but also the ins and outs of the world and life. But definitely check out season 1, season 2, and each episode has a different type of a topic, so that we kind of hone in on. So we can be found on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, and we're also on the Pocket Casts app. So and also on our website. And we're also open to we're on Instagram, as you found us, right? And TikTok and Twitter even. I can't say we're great about updating Twitter, but yeah, we're on all the main things, I guess, so far. So yeah, definitely would love for people to check it out. But and even if not, it was just such a pleasure talking to you about everything. So I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you could join me because this has been so much fun. It's like I do, obviously, the other SPs we talk a lot, but to talk to someone who has done it in other places and just to connect on similarities and things, I do think, like you mentioned, a network. I think it's very cool. I do. I really do. And I think it's a really cool profession. I think it's just, I mean, I have learned so much. And as you said, the students are gaining so much from it. So I think it's awesome. So the Standardized Patients Podcast, I believe, is the
Hmm.
name of your right. Okay,
That is
so
correct.
Apple,
Yep.
Spotify, Pocket Cast, mid September. Look for and if you haven't. That's finishing season 2, but if you haven't listened, then you have a whole 2 seasons that you
That's
can
right.
listen to. It will be a great way to learn more about this industry. So check that out. So thank you so much, Katie, for being my guest this week. It's been so much fun.
Thank you. I have loved this so much appreciated.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Excellent. And for my listeners, I will say that we're in September. This is going to air in September. So next week, we will have my buddy Julie Esty, who also happens to be an SP and is just a real pisser. She is just funny. And she will be talking about a book she released recently, The Center Street Murders in Scranton from back in the early 1900s. She has her ideas about what might have happened with those murders, and she's also preparing for her Dunmore Cemetery tour, where you'll get to see some very great, fun acting and just really cool stuff in the Dunmore Cemetery. So she will be joining us next week. At us, I always hate when I say that because there's no mouse in my pocket. It's really just me and my microphone. But anyway, she'll be joining me, and I hope you'll tune in. And as I always say, thank you so much for listening. Check out the show notes for the link to Katie's podcast, also to my Buy Me a Coffee platform. Remember, you can make a donation. And if you don't have the funds at this moment, please remember there is great value in sharing the podcast as well. Share it with a friend or foe. Just, put it on your social media, write a review, or just tell somebody while you're standing in line at the grocery store. So, as I like to say, I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.